give you an example of communication. I was on a plane coming back from China in April, and I had a cold. So I've got this voice disorder plus a cold on an airline which the people only speak Chinese. So I was up against it, and I had a splitting headache, and I don't get headaches, so it was that bad. And I'm trying to ask the air hostess, could I have something for my head? So it's all visual. You know, I've got a sore throat, sore head, and they didn't understand. They kept saying, don't understand. Well, the guy next to me, who was Chinese, had a translator on his phone. He's speaking to this, speaking to this. I thought, yeah, this is going to be great. So I spoke into it, and I said, what did I say? I had a headache, and I had a headache. I think that was it. And it came back and it says, I love travelling. And I went, I give up.
It's Michelle, and there's been quite a few part diagnoses, but the last one was known as a spasmodic flaccidity.
I'm Brenda Simmons, and my diagnosis is myasthenia gravis, which is a neuromuscular disorder which affects the skeletal voluntary muscles of your body.
I'm Mark, and I'm 51, and I have spasmodic dysphonia.
My name is Carolyn, and my diagnosis is muscular tension dysphonia.
My name's Greg, and I've got spasmodic dysphonia.
My name is Ellie, and I have a diagnosis of abductor spasmodic dysphonia.
Hi, I'm Justine, and I have mixed spasmodic dysphonia.
Hi, I'm Lynn. I was diagnosed with spasmodic dysphonia, mixed AB and AD, and with tremor.
Hi, my name's Louise, and I have mixed spasmodic dysphonia, primarily abductor though.
I used to talk a lot on the phone. I used to work with using the telephone as well, so that I don't speak as much now on the phone as I used to, because it becomes a bit difficult.
I was a chatterbox. My dad said that I was born vaccinated with a gramophone needle. Didn't stop talking all through my adolescence. A real people person, somebody who was generally always had something to say.
And my life was pretty busy with 3 children, and I was working full-time, so maintaining a busy work schedule and family and running around a lot, I guess.
Developing spasmodic dysphonia was really life-changing because my career centred around my voice. Since childhood, I've been a professional entertainer. I was a singer and a compere comedian. So my voice was not just my means of communication in everyday life, but it was also my tool for work. It was my career.
My life was a lot better before I had the voice disorder. I was more social, more connected with conversations, but since getting spasmodic dysphonia, that's all changed.
I was an extrovert, probably as bubbly as you can get, and the person in the room who always had something to say, and probably the loudest person in the room.
Oh, pretty busy, working, being at home, looking after some grandchildren, and just working full time, doing what everybody does, going out, barbecues or going out to restaurants, pubs.
I can talk even now with a mouthful of marbles under wet cement and underwater. So my life was I don't think I've limited a lot in my life, but the thing is that I can't be as social as what I used to be.
Dysphonia means disorder of the voice. Some people call it disorder of speech, but the speech and voice, although they're related, they're a little separate. So when we talk about a disorder of the voice, this means disorder of the laryngeal mechanisms which produce voice, rather than a disorder of pronunciation, which is what we know as a speech disorder. Well, the first thing to say is that dysphonia is never normal. So a voice problem or a change in voice is never normal. There's always something going on underneath. Now, in the short term, it is just a little bit of a nuisance. And in the shorter term, the most common cause of dysphonia is actually an inflammation of the vocal cords, which is usually viral, and this is known as laryngitis. Now, laryngitis is often what people who come into my clinic with a voice problem think they have, because that's the most common cause of a voice change. However, if it's gone on for more than 3 or 4 days, it's probably not a laryngitis. There's probably something else going on. So it makes sense to think, well, if I've got a cold or a runny nose, or I've had some reflux and I've been yelling a lot, sure, I might have a little bit of laryngitis. But if that wasn't the case, or if there are any alarming facts such as coughing up blood or fluid going down the wrong way when you're drinking, then you've got to be a little bit suspicious that something more serious is going on. Really state that anything over two weeks we should be a bit concerned about, and certainly a voice problem that persists beyond more than, say, 2 to 4 weeks. Really, there should be some sort of assessment, and someone should assess this patient to make sure that there's nothing sinister going on, because it really can be the first sign of a serious underlying health problem.
Well, I wasn't, and that was devastating. I'd been admitted to hospital with supposed respiratory problems because I was so breathy. And yet they couldn't understand what was going on because my oxygen levels were fine and I was going in and out. One stage I did say to the doctor, if I hold my throat here, it's better. And I was obviously calming the tremor when I did that.
And my partner actually picked up that my voice was spasmodic at times. Not a great deal, not like it is now, but it just happened spasmodically. She said to mention to the ear, nose and throat doctor that I had a problem. So I did. And he said, yes, well, by the way, you've got spasmodic dysphonia. Nothing else was said, but he checked the vocal cords and whatever, and he just sent me on my merry way and said, take it up with your GP. So I did, yeah. Strange.
I first self-discovered what I had, spasmodic dysphonia. A good old Dr. Google was my first source. I recognised that, because as I said, I was so used to using my voice all the time, I recognised that what was happening was something that hadn't ever happened before. This wasn't laryngitis, this wasn't a tired voice, this wasn't a sore throat, this wasn't any of the things that I'd previously experienced as vocal issues. It was like my voice was cutting out in certain places. Not all the time, would sometimes depend on the time of the day, sometimes it would depend on the circumstances that I was in, sometimes it would depend on how tired I was, but I was just starting to notice that my voice was cutting out.
It's probably worth mentioning that I'm a speech pathologist by background, and before my actual diagnosis, I noticed a change in my voice probably a good 8 months before I did anything about it. And then also when I answered the phone, so being abductor, I have a lot of trouble with breathless sounds, so answering a phone with that bloody H, hello, that's where I started to notice it. And it wasn't until I got quite ill with glandular fever that I got to the point where I had to go and investigate it. And I'd looked in my speechy textbooks and I'd narrowed it down to either spasmodic dysphonia or a psychogenic voice disorder, that from some underlying trauma I might not have realised that I had.
First got feedback from other people that they were was struggling to hear on a telephone. I was speaking and they actually thought that I was on a mobile phone and that the signal was cutting out, so there were interruptions, and I thought, oh, there's something funny going on, but I didn't really think it was that serious until I noticed that it was becoming more and more prevalent. And at the time I was doing a lot of public speaking, a lot of conference presentations, and confidence had never been an issue, but suddenly I started to doubt myself and doubt whether I could really do the job well. So I went to see somebody, and so the story began.
My biggest impact has been with work. I was a regional manager with a financial institution, and my job was always interacting with staff and customers, etc. And I know of examples where they would say to me, I can't understand you, or I can't hear you. Although the worst thing that's ever happened to me was when I had a telephone conversation with a customer, and she actually said, I can't talk to you anymore, you're scaring me.
I'm married, thankfully, to the same fella for a very long time. We've been through many ups and downs, but this I have to say is one of the most challenging things, because it's such a natural thing to communicate, to talk. And when communication becomes impaired because you have to be looking at each other, not talking side by side in the car, you have to turn the radio down, you have to turn the air conditioner off, you have to not call out through the house. It changes the way you relate, it changes your social life. So we were always people to go out with groups of friends, and I started pulling back from that and started to maybe try and control the people that we were with and the places that we went, because it was just too hard.
It has an everyday life. I avoid noisy environments. I'm very selective about if I'm going to meet someone for coffee, where we're going to go. I haven't been able to go to a birthday party or any sort of noisy restaurants or anything like that, or invite, I guess, a lot of people over. So I've been avoiding social interactions which require many people or music, or where I know it's going to be a noisy environment and where I'm going to be so challenged to try and project my voice or have to engage in conversation for a long time.
I couldn't tell you actually how much money we've actually lost through wage. It would be at the moment as we stand, this is the least amount. That's been about $20,000 a year that we lose. And even though at the moment my surgeries are paid through for insurance, it's because I've lost a full-time job. And so over the years, from going from not being able to work and having a reduced income to 2 days to 3 days to 3.5 days, you're just constantly losing it. But I can't even let that into my headspace, because you could sit there and go, well, I've lost all this money and there's no law to say compensating law, but you'd be miserable to think about it. I think you just learn to do the best you've got with what you have.
Yes, socially it did have an impact, because things, again, that you take for granted, meeting a friend for a cup of coffee became almost impossible, because you'd go into a coffee lounge and there's a whole heap of background noise that I had been totally oblivious to before this condition started. I didn't recognise or listen to background noise. Perhaps if I was in a professional environment, I might notice, oh yeah, there's noise that we need to get rid of. But, you don't. You just take for granted. You go to meet a mate in a coffee lounge or in a pub or in a restaurant, and that you can talk. You can't. When you've got spasmodic dysphonia and it's bad, you can't talk over the top of it, over the top of the background noise or background music.
So I think it has to do with how it affects their relationships with others and how they feel that they can communicate in their close relationships. and how they feel it affects their communication with their local community, with everyday living, ordering a pizza, buying stamps at the post office, asking the Uber driver how to get to Lidcombe. And I think also it's to do with the work we do and the occupation that we're trying to support. And so many of our occupations and jobs require our voice as an essential part of our communication. So it's multifaceted in the way it can affect us. And the challenges are in relationship, in community, and in our job.
I wish I could yell. I haven't yelled for years.
Losing my career was really hard to cope with because that combined with the issues that I had around my identity personally, it was really confronting.
Communication, because when I talk to anyone now, I'm more aware from their non-verbal communication as to how they're receiving me.
I think losing a little bit of me, I think having to sacrifice that little part of me and being able to wanting to speak and not being able to at times, even though I try very hard.
You're losing part of my personality. So I get emotional, it's so silly. Yeah, it's that thing about your voice is so much about how you see yourself. And when part of that goes, you know that you're still the same person, but you don't feel like the same person.
The frustration and the loss, I feel like there's a loss of professional identity and the unknown. What's the reality?
I think it's modifying your life, working, family life, to suit, what's going on.
Yeah, look, I think I've actually become a bit more confident, not afraid to speak up, ask for help, be more assertive. If I'm not comfortable doing something, I'll speak up, or if I don't want to do, or just even to learn to say no would always be, prior to this, it would always be, yeah, I can do it. Whereas now, if I'm not up to it, I'll say no.
I went on to Facebook and found a group about spasmodic dysphonia. And reading other people's experiences was helpful because it made me realise that I wasn't alone, I wasn't isolated, that there were other people who did have this rare condition. I joined this group and I put up, is there anybody here from Australia? Thinking there won't be. And sure enough, within a few hours, I had a person contact me. That led to the opportunity for me to meet lots of people who had spasmodic dysphonia. When I say lots of people, not hundreds, but several people who had spasmodic dysphonia. And that was of great benefit to me because the support that I was given through just the camaraderie and the fact that there was somebody who had empathy, that understood, that got it, that knew what I was going through, that was of great comfort to me.
Apart from meeting you, and jokes aside, that has been a great positive, that when I went to the summit in October 2015, it was like a weight lifted from my shoulder that I wasn't the only one that had this problem, that there was others in the community, and we just got on so well, we understood each other, and it's been a great support that has just came at the right time.
It has forced me to take a step back and listen more. And I hope that I've become a better listener and hopefully a better friend to people because I've been able to forced to take a step back and rest and let other people talk. A lot of my friends are introverts, so I'm sure they relish in this, love it.
I'm able to get rid of telemarketers really, really quickly. The the other thing, I think that it's actually made me a much better listener to other people and more acutely aware of silent struggles when people aren't the same as what they used to be. It makes you actually look, I found it's made me look out more for other people.
The good things is that I've met some very special people since I've been involved with others with vocal cord disorders. And I've also, I think, in one way, I certainly appreciate my voice more, and I'm absolutely determined to get word out there.
As I said, I work in health promotion, so being able to channel what I know professionally in that way into an area that's really close to my heart, and to support other people and to feel like we're doing just a little bit to make a difference so that more doctors are aware, not just of the diagnosis, which is important, but of the human impact.
There's been a lot of self-reflection, which has been beautiful, a lot of time to give to others in a different way. So I have an elderly neighbour who I'm able to spend a bit more time, and she just wants some company and I help her. I've done some volunteer work in the botanical gardens, and with animals, because you don't need to talk so much, and so that's, just giving me some time to do things and thinking about some changes and some ways of how I approach things differently, and it's really made me think outside of the square a little bit.
Until it happens to you, you don't get it. You don't know. Sorry. I am saying this as a speech pathologist. I can sit there and tell you how much I've had laryngitis and that I know what it feels like to have lost my voice. No, you don't. Until you're sitting at home and think, I cannot make a phone call, I cannot, I can't order myself, well, you can these days because of online, but, I can't ring up to just change that little thing, or ringing up to change my car insurance. That's a nightmare because people just don't understand you over the phone.
I think probably the social and emotional impact that it has on you, not as much of a specialist that deals in that, but if you're just dealing with a general GP, because you can't expect them to know everything, but I just think to have a quicker understanding of that, it goes beyond your voice. There's a lot that actually extends beyond that, and I think they're just too busy to be able to actually have that time to do that. And that's okay, but it would be good. It would really be good if they had that just a little more of an education with it.
I don't think most of them still have any idea. The ones that I've talked to, they understand the problem, but I don't think they have any idea what it is like to live without a voice. And it's a bit, well, it's the same with anything really, isn't it? Until you've done it, you really don't know.
They range from finding it incredibly fascinating and saying, tell me more, I want to learn, to going, oh, yeah, right, never heard of that, and move on. I just wish that voice, then the value of voice was put up there the same as vision and hearing. Because we do that, we scream, we go and have our eyes tested, we have our hearing checked, we ensure that those things are maintained, but nobody ever thinks about what the impact is of not being able to pick up a phone and have a conversation.
Definitely, I think a little bit more about the impact, and just giving me time off is fantastic, but not having really support in the sense of, should have been told that 3 months or just having some speech therapy is going to fix it, but it's not going to fix it. I feel that the symptoms seem to be there all the time. They're a lot better, but will it completely go away? I'm starting to lose that hope. So, especially as I said, you've got to give it more time. I wish there was a date. I need to learn to be a bit more patient, I think.
Probably more the day in, day out of how exhausting it is actually to speak. And by the end of the day, things don't always go according to plan. Like, you may say, yeah, you want to go out or catch up with someone after work, and then realise, oh, after 8 hours of work, it's enough. I need a bit of quiet time.
First of all, I wish that health professionals understood what spasmodic dysphonia was. Yes, it is a rare condition, but it is real. It's not a bad throat. It's not a bad voice. It's not psychological. This is a neurological condition, and it needs to be taken seriously and not fobbed off as something else or something that can wait, or let's see if it gets better. In fact, the sooner you can take action on it, the better. It's not something you want to leave and let go, because the impacts that can come as a result of just not doing anything can sometimes be worse than not doing anything at all. You know, it's something you need to treat.
I think that the clinician must display an understanding that even if not life-threatening, that this condition is important, and acknowledge that it may have a significant impact upon their quality of life and ability to communicate. But the most important thing is to give the patient or the client hope that something can be done and we can improve their quality of life. And if the clinician is unable to deliver that treatment themselves or make a diagnosis themselves, then to be able to refer the person onto someone who has specialised knowledge in that field and may be able to offer the management that they need.
The notion of management, however, is an overarching approach where the therapist is working absolutely side by side and in partnership with the client or the patient to find the best way for them to meet their communication needs in their life.
But you say if I haven't seen a relative or a friend for a while, and the first thing is, oh, you sound terrible, have you got a cold, or what's happened to you? It's like, well...
I bet your husband's glad about that. That irritates, definitely. Touches a sore, raw note, yeah.
Oh, you're sick. I think that is the worst thing. I went into... If I have a really bad day and don't have sound, I get told that I'm sick. And that's really upsetting because I'm not sick.
Oh, yeah, I had that. I know exactly how you feel. I lost my voice for 3 days. And I go, oh, that's fabulous. Yeah, it's terrible. Tried losing it for 15 years. And that's... I suppose it's in a small way, it's their way of saying, I get it, and it must be awful, but it's hard to hear that.
Funny enough, I'm pretty open to, I have a very good sense of humour on all of this. I take a lot of it with a grain of salt. So people will say, oh, speak up, and I actually am able to laugh a lot of that off. I did have one of the students in my class say a detrimental thing, and that probably hurt more than anything because the kids that I teach have been the most beautiful creatures to work with. But when he said that, was like, oh, that was probably the first comment that I'd ever had, that your voice sounds terrible, and that kind of when I had to go, and pull back.
Don't tell me that you know how I feel, because you don't. You definitely do not. You don't. They don't know the frustrations that I go through in trying to communicate.
When people say, how's your throat? There's nothing wrong with my throat. The inside of my throat is actually, my voice is stuffed, but my throat is fine. In fact, one of the ENT guys said to me he was doing a laryngoscopy, is that it? He was doing a laryngoscopy, and he was looking down, he said, look, your throat is perfect, your larynx is pink and moist, it's beautiful, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your throat, it's your brain that's the problem. And I'm like, yes, precisely. So when people say, how's your throat? It's like, my throat's fine.
But just to have some tact is probably my advice. So it is still a chronic health condition, and it is something that has had an impact on the person.
Have you tried? The minute anyone starts that sentence of have you tried, I want to get up and run away. All those things that I think we've probably all gone through of, oh, have you still got that?
Like to listen, and if you're not comfortable with doing something, make sure that they're aware of that, and just speak up and just take a note of where you want to go out, where you want to meet, and it's also like the time you want to meet as well. Like evening is always difficult because after a day of work you can't become really tired.
Be cognizant and aware that they have a voice condition. There's no point in yelling to them from another room going, hey, do you know where the such and such is? Because I can't yell back. I can't do that. So you need to come, if you want to ask me a question, come to me and ask the question and look at me, because if you can see my face and read my lips, that will actually assist if I have no power in my voice or no chance of projection.
Probably understand more that the way I used to be able to communicate, I can't do that anymore. And if I ask them to order something in a drive-through, then just do it. I don't think that just because you can hear me, that the person at the other end of the microphone can hear me as well. They can't.
Don't talk for me. I can talk, right? I can communicate. I'd like to think I'm quite articulate. If I need you to talk for me, I'll tell you. You'll be able to tell.
I think to try and keep the person who has the voice condition as upbeat as you can, and try not to let them come down to a level, to make them know that, you know, the world is out there and you can come with it, and always include them. I think you always need to know that you were invited to go somewhere, because it gives you the power to say, I'm not up to it, or yeah, that's good. I think them to try and keep pushing, even though sometimes I don't want to hear the positive, I just want a bit of a come on. But I think to actually always include you and actually trying to keep you as upbeat as they can. So it's a bit of a fine balance for them.
To understand it better, I think. I get really frustrated at times, and they do too. And for them not to raise their voice, because it hurts me when they raise their voice, and I feel like I need to raise my voice and I just can't. And it's just that frustrating moment. And the difficulty just simply communicating. We have a very open plan home, so the acoustics is not good. So there's a lot of miscommunication. There's a lot of knocking on the walls when I want attention, or when I want, you know, the children to come downstairs for dinner. It's just those things, and they're learning to live with it a lot better.
Educating them as much as you can possibly. Once you know, obviously, what your diagnosis is and what's going on, is to sharing with them. I know some people don't like sharing or giving away too much information if they're sick. They don't want to burden other people or their family, but I think sometimes that's a hindrance, because then they don't know what's going on. So how do they know then how to help you? So I think that's the best thing, is to educate them.
I think be patient to be patient, and also to be very aware. I've been at family dinners where everybody's chattering away and I try to say something, and because they don't hear when I first try, I just get blanked out. And I find that until the point at some family gatherings, or some gatherings, not just family but with friends too, that I've had to get up and run away and burst into tears quietly, because I felt so isolated in that group of a dozen people. Sorry, it's making me a bit thingy thinking about it. That's probably one of the hardest things, I think, is to try to keep up a normal life.
The biggest thing is being patient. There are good days and there are bad days. In fact, there are good hours and there are bad hours. It's such a changeable feast. Being patient, giving you space when you want to say something and not, this is the classic, not talking over you. Open your mouth to say something and somebody zooms in and that thought is lost. So actually getting eye contact, being engaged, possibly this is a symptom of the world we live in anyway, that people are not perhaps as connected when they're communicating. But I think when you're struggling to get those words out, it's really important to know that all of the effort that's going into doing this now is physical, and you don't want to waste that. Just have somebody talk over the top of you.
I think just knowing the limitations of how much you can and can't do, and trying, it's hard, trying to manage your life around that. I don't work full time, that suits me and what I've got, so working part-time, trying to have a nice rest as well, and doing, outdoor activities, things like that, as well as the cold weather's good for me, or being cool, the heat's not so much.
Probably my biggest tip and trick would be looking after myself holistically, as in managing fatigue and stress. So it doesn't matter how much Botox is in there, and I got a hell of a lot right now. Doesn't matter how much is in there. If I'm really fatigued or really stressed, it won't work. That seems to have a really big impact on my voice disorder, and it might even be going as far as having to reevaluate your life and look at what you're doing work-wise.
Another thing that's really important is keeping well lubricated, making sure that you take lots of water. Some people find alcohol beneficial. I guess that's one of the advantages. They find that their voice actually gets better after a couple of glasses of alcohol. I'm not, of course, suggesting that that's what people should be doing, but keeping hydrated is really important. So, the bottle of water that I have beside me is not just for having fun or drinking, the sake of having some water. It's you need to keep it hydrated in order to be able to keep a voice.
I'd have to say that having another part of your life that you can actually control, so because I have no control over this, I'm getting a little bit better. I understand my cycles and what I'm capable, but I think exercise has been the ultimate saver, even though I struggle with that because of my respiratory dystonia. I struggle with it, but I find that that's been an outlet because that's something I can try and keep achieving with. And apart from cardio, I'm not that limited with that.
Yoga, exercise. So being, I'm very, very passionate about well-being, health and well-being. So practicing a lot of my own self-care, so meditation, yoga. I had acupuncture yesterday, so I'm really good today. So set myself up really well.
Now the speech therapist has said to try and get in as many words within a certain amount of time and then take a breath rather than to keep talking. So then that way the voice is softer.
Probably if I don't think about it, and that's the hardest thing, not thinking about it, because you're very mindful of trying to project your voice in the right manner, so you're thinking about it, and I think that has an impact. But if I've had a few drinks and get to a stage where I don't think about it and I just talk, on occasions previously I'll have periods that my voice, I think, again, what I hear and what's heard could be two different things, where I think I've had normal voice. But it could be a short period of time, 3-hour period.
Well, I've always felt, and I've written about this a lot, and you'd probably know about it, that I actually believe counselling is integral to behavioural voice work. I don't separate the two really. I don't think of, we do vocal exercises here, and then at the end of the session we tag on a bit of counselling. I don't separate them. It's a bit like separating mind and body. I don't believe in that. I think the emphasis of the therapeutic work we do, or the medical work a surgeon would do, can be surgical, medical, behavioural, working on technique. And as part of that is conversation, and deep conversation about the emotional aspects of what it is to have the voice disorder, what it feels like for it not to work, what it feels like to be anticipating the anxiety of it not functioning. And for some people, it would actually be doing some significant grieving for the loss of that voice which really reflected who they thought they were.
It's really important, and it's really hard to try and keep a sense of humour. And I'm a big believer that you wouldn't be given something if someone somewhere didn't think you could handle it, and that there is good in every day. And sometimes you just got to find a bit harder. And hey, this doesn't work, but the rest of my body, apart from my lungs, which go to, the rest of my body works. So, and I have another sister that reminds me to practice gratitude, and I try to do that, and it doesn't always work, and I do end up down in the dumps. But I think, just to realise that, your voice isn't going to define you. Yeah, it mightn't sound great, but you've still got a lot to offer to the world, and there's a lot of good people out there to support you if you look for them.
I honestly believe, and whether or not it's to do with age or whatever, I try not to worry about things I don't have control over. I probably listen more now. Well, that's a fact. I definitely do listen more now. And I think that helps to... And I don't think I'm a stressful person. I don't think I've ever been a stressful person. But I think subconsciously, is my view, subconsciously there could be some stress there of different things that have happened during my life. So I think the biggest frustration I've got, and it's not the question you asked, was that I don't understand why there's not a cure.
Make the most of it, but also to approach all adversities that you come across with humour, and it's not the end of the world. You can still enjoy life. You can still do things. It doesn't stop you going out not having a voice, because you've still got legs and arms and everything, hopefully. But just get on with it and be positive. I think you've got to be positive, but have a sense of humour. You've got to keep a sense of humour, and particularly with no voice, you've got to have a sense of humour.
That, you're never going to believe it, but you're going to run out of words. Your voice, it feels sometimes like that, like I spoke too much and therefore I ran out. It's not going to be easy, but there are good people and there are strategies, and it's actually going to be okay, and maybe they're going to make a difference.
I don't think I could say, in hindsight, what, because I think going through the journey, we turn into who we are. I think it's probably I'm better for that. Yeah, I think so.
In hindsight, looking back on it now, I wish I had realised at the beginning it's not going to stay like this. It can get better. This isn't a sentence. We know it's not life-threatening, but it can really alter and change your life quite drastically. But the knowledge that there is treatment available, you don't have to put up with this. You can You can get help. And if the treatment doesn't actually get you back to 100% of voice, the other thing is that there's other people who understand that you can talk to, that can give you support and advice and encouragement, and even just an ear. Somebody to talk to, somebody to understand the frustrations that you experience that are exclusive, really, to people who have voice conditions. People who don't have voice conditions don't understand. They don't get all of the different things that we all just take for granted. It's only when you have a voice condition or you speak to somebody who has a voice condition or has had a voice condition, they get it. We're a very small group of people, and we've got to stick together.
People respect the professional knowledge, but in terms of feeling truly understood and working out what coping strategies are possible, what management strategies are possible in daily life, it's really helpful if there's support from a group of people who are experiencing the same things. There's a sense of real understanding there and an opportunity to share and to learn from each other. And then the other aspect is, I think, that the Australian Dysphonia Network has the potential to educate voice professionals. As voice professionals, we know physically how the voice works. We have an awareness of some of the other impacts as well. But it's the people who are living with dysphonia who can teach us what it's like, what it means, what is the real impact on their lives of having this problem. And that can give us a much greater insight and understanding into their issues. Helps us better to plan the focus of treatment, if you like, so that we're addressing issues that are important to them rather than things like phonation time or that kind of thing.
We have to live. We have to get on with life. And I don't think anybody can actually understand what it's like to live with a chronic voice disorder unless you've had one. The demands, the stresses, the limitations, the grief, the loss, it's an overwhelming experience for so many people. But we have to live. And communication is such a profoundly essential and intimate part of our living in the world, living with ourselves, living with other people, that if we are to live with the disorder and live above the disorder, we have to live first. So my encouragement is always to just get on and live.